Welcome to Miss Lisa's video channel on YouTube, where we learn about all things math and science. And today we're talking about biology. This is biology chapter 4 in this book, but you don't have to have this book to learn about viruses and monerans. So this class is primarily designed for homeschoolers, but if you like the way I teach something, you're welcome to be here and to learn. My cat's over there look at me like, are you talking to me? Sure, you can learn some biology. So viruses and monerans. So what we are talking about are viruses and bacteria. Viruses are very small. So small that even a regular microscope, you can't see them. You need an electron microscope. And also, viruses are almost like aliens. They are so weird. So they're not really considered to be alive or not alive. Isn't that weird? But it's true. They have a lot of characteristics of living things. They can reproduce. They're assembled, so they sort of grow. They can move. So what they really are like are just little aliens that invade. They're parasites. They take over another cell and a living cell. They need a living cell to survive. And they attack all kinds of things. They attack plants, animals, people, lots of things get viruses. So right now we are going through a big problem that we have COVID virus, and that has just caused terrible destruction all over the world. People have died, economies have shut down, so viruses are really important, and more important than I want them to be, because I don't like the fact that our society has changed so much and people have died because of COVID. So anyway, we're going to be talking about viruses other than COVID. If you've got your book, you can follow along. We're on page 72 and you can see some pictures of viruses. And you can see that they look like aliens. Some of them have little legs. Some of them look like a weird little tube with things coming out the end of it. But they don't really have, they're not a cell. They have a chromosome-like part, and they're surrounded by a protein coat. They don't have cell parts. They don't grow or respond to change in the environment like living things do. They're assembled. They don't really grow. But they do reproduce. But they only reproduce in living cells, so they're limited in their reproduction. So that's why they're not really considered alive or not alive. They have taken viruses that have looked like just little crystals that were just sitting there for 50 years, put them in a cell, and then they grew, and they were back alive again. Not really alive, but whatever they are. So they're a parasite. They need a host. They can attack animals, humans, plants, things like rabies in dogs, cowpox in cows, feline leukemia in cats. You might have had have that before. Colds in humans, German measles, mumps, chickenpox, hepatitis, polio, herpes, which is a sexually transmitted disease, AIDS. These are all viruses. So viruses are terrible that people get them. Sorry, I'm leaning extreme close up. Doodle-doo. It's like Batman. I had to get water. I just feel like I'm on the old Batman show. In and out. Okay, I'll quit that so it won't make you sick. Also, for plants, they're devastating to agriculture, things like the tobacco virus. And there's a bunch of other ones listed in your book. Now then, so how do viruses cause disease? Well, what they do, usually they go up, they attach on the outside of a cell, they inject their DNA, their chromosome material, into the cell. They take over the cell. See, I told you they're like aliens. They'll make the cell start reproducing, assembling viruses to the point where it busts and kills the cell. So that's sort of how it goes. You can read through your book, whatever book you have, reading about the life cycle of viruses. but they're really weird and interesting. Sometimes what they do is they will not only cause their host to reproduce the virus, sometimes they'll cause the host to reproduce itself, causing tumors. There are cancers that are caused by viruses. Also warts. If you've ever had warts, I used to have warts when I was a kid. But that's a tumor caused by a virus. And this is something I like to tell. Sometimes kids get the idea that scientists know everything, that they're all knowing, and that we've got everything figured out and we know everything, and the last word on anything is because of science. Science, that's why. But there is so much that science doesn't know. And there's stuff that science taught, and then later they found out they were wrong. When I was in elementary school, they would teach that it was an old wives' tale that frogs cause warts, that was an old wives' tale, but now we know that that viruses cause warts, and that was just a lie, and showing how great science is, that now we know that warts are caused by viruses. And then we found out that frogs and toads carry the virus that cause warts. So it was true. I mean, they don't cause it directly, but they carry the virus that cause warts. So a lot of times when something's like an old wives' tale, none of it's just crazy. But a lot of times something like that, it's based on years and years and years of observation, that this little boy or girl was playing with a frog and they didn't have warts, and now they got warts, and they're like, frogs cause warts. And then, and if this has been observed for thousands of years, then that's a kind of science too. It's observation. Now, it might not know the whole reason, but it's still observation, and it's still science. And sometimes often in my life, there have been things that scientists say, this is not true. That was like maybe an old idea, but then they come back and go, oh, we were wrong. It was true. So just know, one, that there's a lot of science to be discovered. And the science we have today will be looked at later on as, weren't they crazy? They thought whatever. So we're still learning, and that's good. As scientists, we got to keep learning. All right, so that's just kind of a funny one, the warts ones. All right, so now, how does your body fight the viruses? Well, it's your white blood cells. First of all, they can attack the virus. They can also produce antibodies to fight the virus. Also, your cells have a thing called interferon. That is a chemical that will fight viruses too. Now, the antibodies that the white blood cells produce are specific to a certain virus. And that's how vaccines work. You'll get a shot, or maybe it goes under your tongue, maybe they squirt it in your nose, and it will sometimes be dead virus or parts of viruses. And you're given that, and that causes your body to make antibodies specific to that virus. So the next time you come in contact with that virus, your body's ready to fight it. So that's sort of the idea behind vaccines and how they work. Now, there are some things controversial about vaccines. It's not usually that part of it. Is some of the other stuff they add to it. Like at one point they were adding mercury, but mercury is a heavy metal, and it can cause Mad Hatter's disease, and it can cause, side effects. So that's where some of that controversy from vaccines come in, is some of the additives and whether or not those are healthy for us. So even in that field of science, there's more to learn, and we can get better at it, and we can get maybe really good vaccines that don't have any side effects. That would be just ideal, wouldn't it? So now another thing about viruses is sometimes they can lie dormant a long time. So like some viruses, you get them, your body fights them, you get over them, you're done. Other viruses will just stay alive in your body and lay in wait. And one of those is cold sores. If you ever got fever blisters or cold sores on your lips, or sores on your lips you sometimes get with a sunburn, or with a cold or a fever, that virus, once you've got it, it doesn't go away. When you don't have the cold or the fever, your body can fight it and it goes dormant. But when your body gets vulnerable to it again, it comes back. One time my sister, she had cold sores, and she laid out in the sun and she fell asleep and we live in Georgia where the sun's really powerful. It just seems stronger in certain areas. I think it's the way the sun hits the earth at an angle. But it was the summer in Georgia. She fell asleep. She got really bad sunburn, which caused her whole face to break out in fever blisters. And it was just so terrible. I felt so sorry for her. And I remember we had gone to the mall, and this lady came up to her, just rude as can be, and said, "Oh, honey, what happened to you? Were you in a wreck?" And my sister, like she had enough of it. She was like, "Yeah, sure. That's what happened. Wrecked with the sun. That's what happened." It's the worst I've ever seen anybody have fever blisters. But thankfully it didn't scar, and she's never had that again. But she's super fair. I'm more dark, but she's super, super fair. She's Snow White, and that fair skin, she had no protection from that sun, and she got terrible fever blisters. It was awful all over her whole face, and her face swelled up. It was really sad. All right, so now we talked about viruses. Now we're going to talk about bacteria. Now, bacteria are tiny. You can't see them without a microscope, but you can see them with a microscope. And like if the book says, like on a printed dot on a page 300, about could go across it. So bacteria and viruses are both way smaller than regular cells, but viruses are way, way smaller than bacteria. So just to kind of keep in mind. Now, for your homework this week, you're going to build viruses, and you don't have to have exactly the materials they say in the book. I always have my kids who take my class look around their house and find something to make a virus out of, and a model of a virus. You don't want to make a real virus, but use what you got. Look around, look at empty containers from food or whatever, and make something interesting for your virus models. We had terrific ones last year. People made all kinds of really good viruses. And one, sorry, my thing's saying low power. That's not good. I've got the charger on, but it must not be connecting right. Anyway, make it with what you got. And then another one is, if you have a microscope, I want you to look at bacteria. You're not going to be able to look at viruses, but look at bacteria under the microscope. And if you don't have that, look on the Google. Everything's there, the bacteria and the viruses you can see images of. But always go with a parent. There's bad images out there hiding as good ones. So in your book, you'll see the difference in between a bacteria and a virus. Bacteria do have just a loose chromosome. They have ribosomes, they have a cell wall, they have cytoplasm, cell membrane, they have a capsule over them, and they can even get around with flagella. They can have a tail that they move around with. But they don't have the other stuff that are in cells. They reproduce asexually, which means if this is a bacteria, they look like a pill. They can just break themselves in half, and then each one grows into a new bacteria. To live, they need moisture. They need the right temperature. Some need oxygen, some don't. They can live all over the world. They've been found in all sorts of extreme conditions. They can make themselves sort of like a survival pod called an endospore, and can live a very, very long time in spore form, and then when conditions are right, they come back alive again. So they can kind of make themselves into a seed. They're important. There are far more beneficial bacteria than bad. They're important for decomposers. If we didn't have bacteria, things wouldn't break down when they died. They'd just be dead here forever. Another one is, so those are called saprophytes, and those are decomposers. They use dead material for food. They do cause disease. There are bacteria that cause disease: strep throat, tuberculosis, pneumonia, gonorrhea, another sexually transmitted disease, meningitis. Plants and animals can have bacterial disease. Anthrax can be passed from an animal to a person, so that's bad. A lot of communicable diseases or was there a pass from one organism to another, meaning you could just catch it, and things, there's a lot of things like that you can catch. Helpful bacteria, it's helpful that for digestion. It's very important that we have bacteria in our guts, and cows have it in their guts. Also, bacteria is used in food production, cheese, yogurt, kefir, all of those things, buttermilk, sour cream. Also, bacteria can be used actually to produce antibiotics. Isn't that funny? It's like they're working for the other team. You can get rid of bacteria through canning, through pasteurization, getting things up to a certain temperature to where it kills the bacteria, and it will even kill the endospores. Endospores cause a lot of food poisoning every year. So blue-green bacteria back in my day, a long time ago, used to be called blue-green algae because it has chlorophyll and it can make its own food. So, but now they've decided it's much more like a bacteria that happen to have chlorophyll. So now it's called blue-green bacteria or cyanobacteria. Remember I told you this book makes sure vocabulary is very simple. If you want higher vocabulary, get another biology book. Read this one because it's really great. Do the labs in this one, but memorize the vocabulary list out of the other ones. It will be helpful. So you're going to look at some bacteria, some monerans underneath the microscope this week if you've got one, and have a great time. I love learning about this. I think it's very interesting. I think it's so cool that viruses are so weird, and bacteria are a little weird too. So do your homework and come back next week, and we will learn another chapter of biology because science is great.